Welcome, fellow brave believers. I'm Sean, your host. This is Kingdomcast, and this is the podcast where we search for knowledge, wisdom, and understanding of His Word so that we may better relate His Word to this world. And we just want to give you a big thanks for being here tonight. We got a lot of people in the live chat already waiting for this conversation tonight with our brother Ken Heiderbrecht from Hanging on His Words channel. If you haven't already subscribed, go over there and subscribe. We're going to be talking about the calendar tonight. He just put out a new video going over the Enochian Jubilean 364-day solar calendar. We're going to be discussing that, and I think it's going to be a fun conversation. As we're going to see, there's a lot of intentional concepts throughout history that have tried to make the topic of God's holy calendar as an actually difficult topic, but it shouldn't have to be. He did explain to his prophets what that is. So without further ado, let's bring on our brother Ken Heiderbrecht, and we're going to have a talk tonight about this as well. Ken, welcome, brother.
Shalom, brother. Thank you so much for having me on. I do appreciate you inviting me on to Kingdomcast. This is a dream come true, brother, being on this program. It's such an amazing podcast, and I highly recommend it to people all the time. So thank you for having me on.
Cool, brother. Yeah, I'm glad to have you. So as people can see from the thumbnail as well as the screen behind you, you have recently put some time and effort into putting together a coherent and under what I feel is understandable presentation on the creation solar calendar. Tell us a little bit about that.
Yes, that's true. I thank you for the kind words. I hope it's clear and concise. That's been my aim since the beginning of creating all videos on my channel, is to present the truth clearly and concisely and contextually. So I hope to do that, and I also really hope to do that in the creation solar calendar, because it is a daunting topic. Honestly, it's a topic that I had put off for years, Sean, and I'm sure you are aware of that. As I'm sure you've experienced over years of having a YouTube ministry, people reach out to you constantly and consistently wanting you to touch on topics and subjects that is near and dear to their heart. And unfortunately, there's only so many hours within the day for us to look into things. But one of the things that I was approached several times by people is the calendar. Which calendar are you on, Ken? What are your thoughts on what Enoch has to say, what Jubilees has to say? And honestly, it was a topic that I just thought of being way too divisive. We're never going to understand it properly. It's been lost in translation. It's been lost through cultures. It's been lost prophetically. And there's no way we could ever get back onto, the actual timing that the Father had instituted at the, first week of creation. So that was my perspective. That was my impression. And until finally I acquiesced, and it took one brother reaching out to me and asking me if I would be interested in looking at his solar peg calendar that he had created. And I said, yeah, I'll look at it. And I looked at it and I thought it was really neat. And there was nothing overly impressive about his reach out to me. I think it was just what I needed, a kick to really start looking at, there's something tangible here. This is more interesting than just, a PDF being created or you know what I mean? So it took that discussion with this brother to get me to fully commit to finally investigating the calendar topic. And so since I have done that, it has opened my eyes to many things. It's helped me better appreciate not only the scriptures for what they have to say, but the biblical creation model itself. I mean, it's an integral piece that marries with the creation model. And so I don't know why I put it up for this long, but I'm glad that finally the Father kind of, said, Ken, it's time now. Let's look into this thing, and then, hopefully help other people with your reach to look into it as well and do their own research and study it and light a little fire under them to do so. So that's kind of the initiation of me looking into this calendar. Now, I want to just say at the outset, Sean, I am not an authority on anything related to the calendar. Okay, it's actually quite more complex than I had originally thought it would be. But that said, it is in the scriptures, as you said. Enoch talks about it. The book of Jubilees talks about it. And we can discern through the writings of those faithful prophets what the calendar is all about. And I do believe now I've had a switching of opinion regarding that perspective. I do believe we can get on it. I think we can get onto the Father's initial week 1 of creation, his calendar that he instituted then. It requires quite a bit of diligence on behalf of everybody who's interested. I think it's going to take a long period of time, actually. It could take years to actually get us right where we need to be, to get right on track with keeping with the time. But I think it can be done. But yeah, so I put this video out, I think it was just over a week ago, and it's one of my longer ones. I'm committed to keeping things kind of short and sweet on my channel. I respect everybody, and ministry that puts out videos and wants to put out long ones, short ones, little, 1 minute ones to hours and hours on end. It's all good. My heart and my calling is to put something out kind of in the middle, if I can say that. But I broke my rule on this one because there was just so much. I felt like I condensed it down enough, and it was still kind of long. So I'm hoping that people who do watch it and who are interested in this topic will go through the entire hour and 20 minutes that it is, and do their own research. But it's been a huge blessing, and it's gotten a lot of good feedback. You get your naysayers as well, but for the most part, people are pretty excited about it. And why not? Because it ties into the feast days, right? It helps us keep better track of the feast days. We can better understand perhaps the events in the New Testament regarding feast day keeping with Yeshua and the apostles. So it's awesome. I love it.
Yeah. That's, I think, a part a lot of people don't quite understand why there's so much discussion about the calendar issue is a lot of folks have kind of reawakened, if you will, to the importance of our discipleship, being that it's, all the instructions in the Bible that apply to us. And this is one that's mentioned right out the gate. I mean, we're talking Genesis 1. It's right out the gate. Genesis 1, verse 14, the sun, moon, and stars are placed for days and years and signs and seasons. Now, that word in the Hebrew, yes, it can mean seasons, and it also can mean the Moedims, which is the feast days. And that specifically, those types of seasonal references, which is that word Moedim is for, the collaborative feast day in the Hebrew. A lot of modern English translations don't present it like that. People in modern English vernacular will see the word season and then they think, oh, it's just like spring, autumn, summer, So that's something that it right out the gate when the Father is describing what he made, which is the biblical creation model, right? Where the sky is the limit. He also is describing why he put the sun, moon, and stars there. And it's for us to actually have a huge, unmistakable and unmissable point of reference. So we can literally just look up and say, like the idea was if you fell off a log and knocked your head on a rock and was in a coma for 3 days and you woke up and you didn't know what day it was, well, you could actually figure out what day it was, right? By just looking to where the Father is literally. And then you could see the actual placement of these indicators he put up there, these literal signs. It's so funny. Isn't that just the idea of a billboard that you see on the highway when you drive? You know what I mean? They don't put, 99% of billboards are not put next to the road on the ground. They're put up in the sky, right?
Yeah.
When I just
For
think
many
it's
eyes to see. Yes,
exactly. It's something about the actual placement makes a difference. And the Father knew that too, since we're on the plane of the earth, on the ground, he's above us. And this encapsulating firmament he put between us, he actually placed in that firmament these signs. So we could just look up towards where he is and see, how he gave us these indicators to know what time of the year we're in. But throughout history, it seems that we've lost the ability to do that. Ancient travelers used to navigate by the stars, maritime travelers. It was a very common thing to be taught to people. But these days, like a lot of kids don't even look up from their actual cell phones, much less learning the rotation of the stars, the sun and the moon.
Yeah, exactly.
So for a lot of people that are brand new believers, this topic may seem frivolous or unimportant, but for others that really like to study the scriptures, you step into an understanding of, okay, so if the Father tells me in like 5 different places in scripture that his feast days or his actual holidays, his fun times of convocation that he wants to get with us and have a celebration time, and that those are eternal, those are never going away. And he wants me to practice those because we'll be doing those forever in the kingdom to come. And then he tells me like he designed his whole creation to actually work in conjunction with those celebration times. Like,
Mhm.
to me, that's super interesting. To me, like, it's not a frivolous topic to him
No.
if he literally created the sun, moon, and stars to be points of indicator for those celebration times. So I
Yeah.
think that we don't want to be divisive over it, like you said, but at the same time, there's a reason why people get so passionate about these topics.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think the Father wants us to pay attention. You know, just how much do you love me? I like how Paul puts it in, what is it, Acts 17, where he talks about, he put mankind on the earth, and they're all kind of groping, reaching towards him, right? That they would all
Mhm.
kind of find him in a way. And I think this correlates when we're looking at the luminaries, right? The sun, moon, the celestial bodies above us. We're essentially looking for the Father to meet him on his appointed times, as you said, the Moedim. And interestingly enough, Sean, as we can discover in specifically the book of Jubilees, it appears that the heavenly sons of God, the angels, also abide by this particular calendar, because there's several interactions that take place with some of the patriarchs like Abraham, Jacob, where they're on these feast days and they have angelic interactions during this time, which
Mhm.
I think points to the fact that they were on a calendar that was
Mhm.
important to them, because it was the Father's calendar for all of creation, not just for mankind on this plane of the earth, but for all of his sons and daughters throughout all creation. So that's why it's important. Is it salvational, Sean? We hear this often. It's not a salvation issue, right? No, of course not.
No.
However,
Yeah.
with all things,
Go ahead.
right, Sean, we strive to get as close to the truth as we possibly can. I think the Father wants us to do that with the time that he's given. I mean, what better time spent than trying to pursue the ways of the Father and to honor him by searching for him, and he will only bless us in doing so.
Yeah.
So that's why I do it. That's why I encourage other people to do it as well. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah. It reminds me of new believers that come in, and to what you're saying, it's not salvational, right? So just like, the brand new believer that comes in, they hear the message of the wonderful Messiah, how much he loves you, how he sacrificed himself to die, get resurrected, become your high priest. It's a beautiful story. He wants to give you eternal life at the appointed time.
Yep.
It's very, very interesting that those terms are used for the day of the Lord. At the appointed time, he wants to give you eternal life, right? That is the John 3:16 fulfillment. And as a result of this beautiful story, that good news, right? That gospel, people come into it not knowing all the details. They just kind of know the basics, right? Just the bumper sticker phrases, right?
Mhm.
But as they dig in further, kind of like Paul says in Romans 6, he didn't know what coveting was until the commandment brought forth the feeling of, oh yeah, that's right. I shouldn't covet. So that's what coveting is. So I
Yeah.
shouldn't covet. Okay, so in like manner, the same way with God's Sabbaths, right? His days of rest and also his holy convocations, his days of feasting and joy and celebration, to which you would rest from your labors to toil for profit, and you enjoy celebration a day unto him, right? So this idea of the Sabbath is a feast day, both the weekly as well as the quarterly, seasonal, different appointed times. They're all feast days. So with that in mind, that is the furthering discipleship knowledge that we should all be learning about, because it is a part of our discipleship of believers in Yeshua of Nazareth, the Messiah. And that's, I think, is what I like. Thank you for pointing that out, brother. It's not salvational. It's just as you progress in becoming more like the Messiah, right? That's who you're discipling after, right? We start to learn more about the pattern of life that he kept, and that was also to keep these feast days.
Yeah, and we're not striving to attain superiority complexes or anything, right? Like, look what I know versus what you don't know. Um,
Yeah, why would we
we,
just do that with this topic? Why wouldn't we say, "Oh, look what I know. I know not to murder people." You don't know that yet? You're like, "Of
yeah,
course not." Like, so all these instructions for our right living, we should do them humbly.
yeah, amen, amen, brother. So the origins of this calendar, in the video that I put out, and I'll admit this is speculation, but I think it's based off of um, logic, that Adam was probably the first one. Adam and Eve were probably the first ones on this calendar. I don't think it was only revealed to Enoch in the sense of now you were to start observing seasons and feasts and keeping track of time and a calendar. I think Enoch, as you know, Sean, was a very particular, unique, very highly esteemed man that the Father thought he was put in a position to come, if I can say, close to the Father, closer than the most men on earth during those particular days. So he entrusted this information with Enoch because of his righteousness, right? Being a prophet, a scribe, being a man who apparently first scribed things down as one of the first men to do so. He thought, well, let's show this guy everything above him. Let's show him how this all works so that he can then pass this information down to Methuselah. Methuselah can pass it on to Lamech, then on to Noah, and so forth, right? For posterity purposes and for just the progeny of man, knowing that there is a flood coming where only a handful of men are going to survive this thing and repopulate the earth on the other side. So Enoch, I don't believe, was the first person to be, operating on this calendar. I just think, like I said, he was literally taken up in the spirit to the heavenly areas of the firmaments where all these luminaries perform their circuits, and was shown by Uriah himself, one of the the leading archangels, who was in charge of actually making sure all order takes place up there as these luminaries perform their circuits. He had Enoch essentially on a tour, saying, "This is what everything is. Look it, write this down. The sun goes through this gate. It does its circuit for this many days. The moon goes here and does that. The stars go here. They go through portals." And write it all down, because you're going to need to know this information moving forward for posterity purposes. Yep. Now, I do believe, Sean, and you probably think so too. And if not, then I'm sorry for putting words in your mouth. But I think, Adam and generations of men after Adam up to Enoch were on this calendar. I don't believe there's a dispensation of calendars taking place. I think.
What about the first assumption that people make of a dispensation, which is that God gave a different instruction for behavior to mankind that he doesn't abide by? That's the first assumption built into, like you just said earlier. You didn't make this assumption, but I'm saying people could hear what you said through the lens of that assumption when you said you think Adam was the first one to keep it. And I would say actually the angels were the first one to keep it, right?
Sure. Like they were created first.
That's how they could teach it to Adam or anyone afterwards, is because they literally lived it. Like, this is, what I'm saying? And in fact, I'll put this on screen just real quick. This is what Jubilees says in Jubilees chapter 6. So this is where he says, for this reason, it's ordained and written on the heavenly tablets. That means that's the Bible in heaven.
Yeah.
That they should celebrate the Feast of Weeks in this month. That's the Shavuot, first fruits, to renew the covenant every year. And this whole festival was celebrated in heaven from the day of creation till the days of Noah. And then he talks about how Noah's sons, transgressed the covenant and didn't do it right. So to me, it's like it literally tells you right there, the same book that's also telling you that you use for your research, the Book of Jubilees, tells you how to do the calendar. It's also telling you the angels in heaven kept the same feasts and this same pattern in heaven since creation began.
Yeah, 100%. 100% agree. And as you said in your last Kingdomcast, talking about dispensation theology, right? I mean, this is just another one of those things. It's like Yahweh is a God of order. He didn't just, hundreds or thousands of years into creation, give a calendar. He didn't give a law, like an instruction manual for how all men are supposed to live. He did it from the beginning and slowly revealed chunks of it throughout time. But it wasn't just like, here, now I'm going to change things, and you're a particular people going to only follow it. Everyone else can do their own thing. Like, this is, and that has to do with calendars too, in my opinion. He wants all mankind on the same calendar, the initial calendar he instituted at Creation Week, and
Yeah, it's pretty amazing. I also, just for those listening, guys, you guys know that on this channel, specifically even on Kingdomcast, not just our main channel, Kingdom in Context, but on Kingdomcast, I've done multiple videos where I use the Book of Jubilees to explain. We've gone over testing the Book of Jubilees on my main channel, as well as we've done. I'm slowly getting to all the chapters, but we've already covered the first 15 chapters line by line through the Book of Jubilees on Kingdomcast. Those are 3 previous videos called "What Do You Know About Jubilees?" And I cover 5 chapters at a time, just to try to show people that this was one of the ancient scriptures that the Hebrews had back in the day. This was considered a part of their scriptures. It's been lost to us in the West in our canons here, but It is a fantastic book, and specifically when it comes to the Moedims or the feast days and the appointed times, whether it's unleavened bread or Shavuot or even the new moon celebrations that we're going to talk about here in a little bit. There's this unique pattern I've noticed in the book of Jubilees, whether it's Abraham or Isaac or Jacob or Noah, all these angels keep showing up on these feast days, like specifically on these feast days. So Ken, this might sound a little selfish, but I want to figure out this right calendar because I want to celebrate it on the right day in hopes that maybe the Father will send one of his angels to show up, at that time.
I'm sure we've all wanted angelic interactions in our lives, Sean. Anyone who's a believer who loves angels and wants to meet one, I mean, this might be a possibility to arrange such an event to take place. So, could it be? It might be. Who knows? It would be something I personally want to work towards to try to see if we can line up and get on this right calendar. Perhaps it can happen.
It's interesting. And just real quick, before we get too far, guys, also go check out and subscribe to Ken's channel. You can access the calendar that he's actually prepared and made for you to have and download through his Patreon as well, and you'll see that information in his video descriptions. So go check that out if you want access to the calendar he's made. And so let's jump into like some of the calendar itself, because you talked about your calendar is, I can see in the picture behind you, you've got the 364-day solar calendar, but then you've got it kind of transposed to the Gregorian for easy reading. Is that right?
That's correct. I mean, we're all on the Babylonian influenced calendars of modern day. And so most of us probably are attached to such a work schedule that's based off of a Gregorian based calendar. So it just makes it easier to have that, for easy access to see which day it actually is according to your work week. But eventually the goal would be to completely eliminate that, because we'll all be as a community in solidarity and on the original creation solar calendar. So that's the objective and the goal, right, Sean?
Yeah. Yeah. And once you get it down, you start to realize it's not that difficult. And even what's crazier is I pulled up a little picture real quick. You talked about in your video, you interviewed a guy who had made a physical board, what's considered a calendar pegboard. But I love his design. I think it's great. But did you know that archaeologists found an ancient design of a calendar pegboard, specifically in their territory of Israel? And I'm going to put it on screen real quick for us. If I can find it. Where'd it go? Why can't I find it?
I did see that, by the way, Sean, and it definitely was an influence on this other calendar that you probably pull up to, for people to see. But it's a great working calendar.
Yeah, sorry, 1 second. Let me see if I can.
It's okay.
See if I can find this real quick.
Well, while Sean's pulling that up, I want to point people to what's behind me here. So this is like the front of the calendar, the cover of the calendar. And so, yes, it's as shown to Enoch in heaven. And obviously the book of Jubilees, angels revealed a lot of the information to Moses as well while he was on Sinai, receiving the fullness of the law. And to my right here, the same priestly calendar that Zadok followed. Zadok was a high priest, from the lineage of Aaron, who was from the lineage of Levi. And Levi was initially given the priesthood from his father Jacob. And it's a succession of priesthood that goes all the way back, probably as early as Adam. Once again, this is another one of those topics that I know Sean's talked at great lengths about, priesthood and the need and necessity of the priesthood for mankind. There has to be one operating in order for men to have someone mediate between the Father and us. Luckily we have, and thankfully we have Yeshua, our high priest, doing that currently, while we don't have a physical priesthood on the earth right now. But Sean, how's that? You get that pulled up, or?
Yeah.
Oh, you're good to go?
Yes. Okay. So this is what was found. And in this particular citation, we covered this in Honor King Season 2 as we were reviewing the Book of Jubilees a little bit. And Biblical Archaeology Review from 1983, they actually highlighted this pegboard that was found. And it's dated back to the 7th century BCE. So guys, that's 20 700 years ago, right? So this looks just like what in your video, you interviewed a guy who made his own. Whether he had this as his inspiration or not, I'm not sure. The point is, it makes sense if you're going to be using it for the same purpose, right? You have a certain amount of pegs that would go in to make the 364 and to keep track of the days, So it's pretty interesting that literally archaeology has found that this was what was being kept back in the day. That lines up with the entire account that's only found in Enoch and Jubilees. And that's something that I think modern Christians should really take to heart, because again, their life revolved around the temple of God, which on the feast days, it was a huge thing for people to come far and wide to the feast and celebrate, and all the commerce that interacted there, the atonement that was made, all the different things, the celebrations. So it would be extremely important for the Father to clearly and without question give out the information to his prophets for his people to know how to keep these feast days. And he did that with valid prophets who we still have their writings today, both from Moses, the book of Jubilees, and also Enoch in the book of First Enoch. So now a lot of people don't realize the book of First Enoch is kind of mixed with some of the book of Noah as well. But ultimately, the collection of manuscripts that we have that have now are generically called the book of First Enoch has the majority of the writings of Enoch himself. So it's just amazing. It's truly amazing. Sorry to interrupt you, though.
No, that was good.
The Gregorian translation.
It's good because, as you said, the priesthood was in charge of disseminating, the instructions to anybody that wanted to be in covenant with Yahweh. They needed to know how to properly interpret and teach, right? And so this was all part of it. This calendar system that they operated under, they had to know it too intimately, and that is actually, as you said, the calendar you just pulled up, the ancient one from the 7th century BC. That was, I believe, the template. Yeah, that one there. That's the one that brother Ken Henderson, who is in my video there briefly, used as a template for his one that he created. So very simple, right? Very simple. As you mentioned earlier, Sean, it's a 364-day calendar, as opposed to 365 or 365.25 or 365.2524. Gregorian calendar. And so it's a very specific thing. It's the book of Enoch describes it in such a way that there's 360 days. So I don't know if you're going to pull up the actual visual of the 4 quarters with all the numbers and all that. I can probably go over that if you want, Sean.
Yeah.
But yeah, the one that you have on screen here is the one that Ken Henderson sent to me. And it's a beautiful, fun thing that you just move the peg every day. And so you're actually interacting and being intimately familiar with what day you're on this calendar by moving the peg every day and just anticipating when the Sabbath comes, when the new season comes, and etc. So it's a fun interactive way of actually participating with what the Father has created, and it's simple. It's there's no complexity to it. I suggest people go into a minute 10ish into that video and just watching me explain it. Hopefully it's clear and concise for people who are wanting to possibly create a template of their own to start doing this as well. But Sean, if you want to go back to the other graphic there, I can explain it a little more. So right here is just a basic visual of the entire calendar on one screen. So what we have here is obviously I got the sun in the background, and then I have, because it's based off of the sun, the circle with 4 quarters or 4 divisions of the year representing the 4 seasons, and it's they're 30-day months. So there's 12 months. All of them have 30 days. And then there's 4 what we call intercalary days. And these intercalary days are basically just seasonal segues into the next season. And in the book of Enoch, it describes to us there's 4 angels that are in charge of actually doing these 4 days to transition into the season. So that's really fascinating. But so it's what you're seeing here is essentially You got the vernal spring equinox on the left side of the screen in the green. When that takes place, which happens on the 20th of this, I think is it the 20th? Yeah, the 20th, Sunday the 20th of this month in our Gregorian calendar. According to mathematical calculations, that's when it's taking place. But then after this takes place, we have this intercalary day, which leads into month number 1 of day number 1. And so it's called the head of the year. This is when we start our year in spring, when things are starting to grow and sprout out of the earth. And so I think this is how the Father created the earth when he first created it, right? And it's springtime, and things are starting to pop up and flourish across the earth. And so we have, like I said, they're split into 4 quarters. There's 3 months in each season. Each month has 30 days. And then at the end of the 3rd month, you add 1 day. So you can say it's 31 days, and it'll say that on the actual calendar or the PDF that people can download over on my Patreon page, 31 days, because that's how there's no other way of representing that intercalary day other than just adding a 31 to the end of the 3rd month. But on this particular visual, you just do the 30, 30, 30 intercalary day, 30, 30, 30 intercalary day. You do that all the way around until you get back to the head of the month again, or head of the year rather, sorry. And so it's simple. And the red digits in the middle there, Sean, where it says, if we go to in the spring section, month 1, just below it, there's the number 4 there, if you can all see that. That essentially is just, I want people considering the gates or the portals, as some translations term it, in the book of Enoch, where Enoch is basically being shown where the sun's moving through different gates, depending on what part of the year. So it starts, and this is what I believe happened when the sun was brought forth into creation on day number 4. It went through this 4th gate and started its circuit. And it just has never, well, I shouldn't say it's never stopped, because we know that it has stopped periodically. Joshua's
for 10 hours.
Yeah. But so that's what that represents. It goes through the 4th gate, and it does that circuit for 30 days in gate number 4 until the end of the month. And then it transitions into the 5th gate for 30 days, and then into the 6th gate. And Enoch records that there's only 6 gates. And then once we reach the summer months, it actually loops back. So it goes back into the 6th gate, then goes back to the 5th, the 4th, all the way 3rd, 2nd, 1st. And then when we have the winter solstice, or that intercalary day leading into the winter seasons, it goes and it loops like it did to the 6th gate back into the 1st gate. So it's just looping in these 6 gates, and it goes, and it'll make its way all the way back to the 4th gate, from which it starts the head of the year again. Now, the book of Enoch, Sean, talks about how this 4th gate is actually the Great Gate. And I'm going to be talking about it in a video regarding how I actually think that this is where the sun, in a way, replenishes itself, because it talks about how there's windows of fire just to the left and the right of these gates that I think give the sun its energy again to kind of do its strong course again. So there's an interesting transition of energy, if you want to call it that.
That would make perfect sense, as it's going through a firmament structure that literally it can be the conduit for ultimate energy. Is that you would have it pass by, I don't know the electrician's term, but you'd have it pass by some sort of relay that would recharge it.
Yeah, exactly. And it's like a torch, right? It just pass by, boom, it lights up, and it continues on. And it could be, and this is a theory again, I don't know. I don't want to speculate too much on this broadcast, but I think that, as Enoch talks about the moon receiving some of the energy from the sun, so that she can do her phases, the sun might be just losing its warmth, and obviously it does it as it's changing gates and getting colder. And I mean, there's so much built into this, Sean. I don't want to distract from it, but all the portals and the gates and the different seasons, how they come through portals and gates, and it's a very fun and confusing conversation to have. But I'm hoping that people like yourself and myself and others who are interested can provide clarity for people, because it's super fascinating. It shows a mechanical creation model. Like it
Yes.
shows there's so much order, and there's angels involved with everything, literally helping
Yeah.
everything move. You know, they pull a lever here, this gate opens, it goes through here. Like it's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. There is, let me see here if I'll put this on screen real quick. This is this is the book of Enoch, to what you're talking about, right? And so you have here in chapter 82 where it's talking about the intercalary days. Okay, guys, and this is not calories like things that make you fat or whatever. This is like, this is just mean like, you know, the little spaces in between the seasons of the calendar, or the every 90 days to get that 91st day every 3 months. And so this is in chapter 82, as I have highlighted already in verse 7, for the luminaries and months and festivals and years and days, right? So this is him getting an exact reckoning shown to him, and Uriel, this angel who's in charge over all these other angels, whom their whole crew, if you could call it like this, the angels in charge of all the luminaries, like Uriel's the foreman, you know what I mean? He's in charge of all of them, but that whole crew of angels, they are responsible for making sure the movements of the sun, moon, and stars keep going through the right gates. They're watched over, like they have a job, right? They're not, these angels as far as I understand, they don't come to earth like the other angels do. Like these particular class of angels are just in charge of making sure this part of the creation stays functioning as intended, which I think is like you said, it's a mechanical setup. Like this is not the chaos that we've been taught growing up. We've been taught that the world exploded from nothingness. Somehow infinite density came about, which is completely stupid. But something exploded. They can't tell you what, but something exploded. And then as things are randomly still flying in the direction of their explosion, then suddenly they started being attracted to each other and creating these elliptical orbits and all the nonsense of heliocentrism, which it's just completely devoid of all this description that the Father gave us through his prophets about how his servants he also created are responsible for what you see above your head. Imagine, Ken, if someone came up to you and said, you're leading people to understanding the scriptures, to, this is what God has called you to do. This is what you're great at. This is, and someone come up to you and just didn't understand that and said to you, I don't think that you do that at all. I think that you just, you just play cricket all day at your house in your backyard.
Yeah.
Like, can you imagine the disrespect modern believers show these angels when they look at the stars and say, oh, that's all just, the Father just put everything there. Like even, like theistic, evolutionary, heliocentric type believers, right? Mm-hmm. People that disbelieve the plainly written words of Genesis 1 in favor of what they were indoctrinated to believe as little children of an occultic model called heliocentrism. And they believe that model in all of its contradictions over and above the plainly worded, very logical instructions of how the creation model was made with these angels in charge of it, thereby robbing these angels of their entire purpose.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? It's
there's a barrier in their mind, brother, just like there was a mind for many years with regards to lots of things. But I hear you. It unfortunately robs these angels of their duties in a way where it's, sorry, I didn't mean to.
Yeah.
Cut
No,
you
you're
off there.
good. That's exactly right. So just for those of you watching, guys, this is why we have here the four, this is why it's all set together, right? Because in two different places, we're told that these are both the sun and the moon, and the stars, there are set in their places for a specific reason. And that is a part of God's instructions for how we are to live, to celebrate his days of festivals, which is his Torah, which is his eternal instructions for right behavior. He wants us literally in his instructions for mankind how to live. He was like, take a break every now and then, have a fun time. Like that's all these are. Like these are not burdensome. These are not somehow, these are not crazy.
Zero burdens to be had. Absolutely.
Yeah. And then this is, of course, is the four leaders that you were talking about, right? And how they're in charge over certain. These are actual angels.
Yeah, they're actually named. They're named later on. Yeah, they're dudes. They're real. They're real brothers above us who are in charge of those four intercalary days, the seasonal segue days. It's incredible. Sean, I just want to say your contextual study guide is amazing. I was poring over First Enoch the other day, and it's so easy to you make it so it's a cheat sheet. It's so
Yeah,
amazing to just, follow along. And then you got a little bit of commentary, which is great. You're not heavy on the commentary, but then you showed the reader how to exactly to parse out certain parts of the, whatever it is that they're reading, and it provides context in an elegant way. And I highly recommend people get a hold of this because it's a super impressive resource.
I appreciate it, brother. Yeah, and that's and we just released First Enoch, by the way, for people to have early access to before the big book is finalized. So, and this took me a long time. First Enoch, man, like I flew through like the first 65 chapters or whatever, but then I got to the creation model chapters as well as all the prophecies and the parables and everything. That just took forever because I had to make sure that the commentary wasn't like you said too heavy. But actually was helping to describe these things that seem foreign to us at first.
Yeah.
Because so many people are unfamiliar with what this is, right? This is literally like if you ever wanted to know what's heaven like and how does God work, well, he wrote it all down and gave it to his prophets, and he wrote it in a book. You can read it. Like it's amazing. And most people are not ready for it.
Yeah, that's right. And if most people who might be tuning in to this broadcast are unfamiliar with the writings of First Enoch and want to, I highly recommend starting from the first chapter, right, and working your way through. But if you want to jump to where we're discussing things tonight, section 3 is what it's called in the R.H. Charles version, the Book of the Courses of the Heavenly Luminaries. And I think there's about 11 chapters in that section that just literally just drive home. Yeah. All the stuff that we're talking about. And like I said, I've been reading Enoch. I don't know how many years it's been, Sean. How many years have we been reading Enoch? And you probably even before me. It's probably about 6 or 7 years for me. But
it's been a long time.
I skipped section 3 for many years. Like I would read it, but it just went over my head. Mainly because the first few years that I was reading Enoch, I didn't have a biblical cosmological worldview. I still had the heliocentric worldview. So this stuff to me didn't make a single lick of sense. Then when I came into the understanding of the biblical creation model, I came back to this section 3 and I was like, this really does work in a flat earth system. However, I still don't have a clue as to what this section is really talking about. Let's move on. And then it was a couple of years after that, I'm like, now I'm really reevaluating this section. And I think it's probably one of the coolest in the whole book. The entire book's amazing. It's my favorite book by far. But this section is so cool. I mean, it even, not to get off track, but I feel like I need to explain something here, Sean. The sun itself is described as being the same circumference of the heaven or of the firmament. So it tells us, because we can peer up and see the luminaries above, they're in a circle. So it tells us that the firmament is essentially the same shape as the heavenly luminaries, right? In a circle. Wow. Like to me, that's impressive. Another thing that's impressive is that it talks about how the sun in its circuit, it's on almost like how do I describe it? It's kind of like those toys when we were kids where you put a car on a track and you have this little trigger and you pull the trigger and it goes around a track, and you can, if you go too fast, it'll go flying off the track. It's I see that being described here in some instances where the sun is going on its circuit, and it has I think it's like 12 windows or something like that are in this track that allow the sun to peer through into us. Like it's crazy. And it has a chariot that is essentially moving this thing. And on top of that, what's moving the chariot, which is moving the sun, are these winds. And there's these winds that Enoch talks about several times in his book. First off, one holding up the entirety of all creation are these winds. It's insane. Then we have these winds moving the sun and the moon and the stars. They're actually like pushing them, doing their thing. It's bizarre. It's there, and it fascinates me, brother. You're on mute there. Sorry.
To me, this is the central AC system that the Father built in to the multiple layers of the firmament. I don't have a model to show this, and I haven't really talked about this on my channel, but this is just my speculation, is that these solar winds, these winds of heaven, right, that flow through these different and push both the sun, moon, and stars and in different ways. It makes me think that later is recycled and then brought through the 12 portals that go into our level of firmament that cause the different types of, rain and storms and different things that it says in later chapters. I think it's chapter 77 or 78, but it talks about the 12 different portals within our layering over the plane of the earth. And so I've just wondered, where do those winds come from at their most origin? And is that just being derived somehow from the pressure differential within the layers of the firmament itself? Mm-hmm. So just like we have with the winds that come into our enclosed cosmology, in our layer of the firmament, is it possible that because there's pressure differential gradients that cause jet stream, and then those jet streams will move and cause lesser types of strong winds below that to flow up on the actual surface of the earth? So there's a pressure differential of winds themselves within the enclosed cosmology that we exist in. And I've wondered if that's also replicated in the heavens above, basically, long story short, pushing all of them down. And so that's where it's just layering down till it finally gets to our surface level, to which obviously it's kind of stopped by the surface of the earth and then pushed into the outer gates where it would be recycled. Basically, it's a big recycling thing, Yeah. So just a thought. I can't really show it. I don't have a graph or anything or a model, but it's just.
I know I struggle with making graphs and models of this too, because it's like even just directions are kind of hard to comprehend on this thing, right? But as you were saying, like it's super fascinating that our firmament structure has 12 windows, 3 in each. I mean, because our structure is quartered off as well, and each quarter has 3 windows in it, and it lets in various types of winds, as you were saying. And one of the winds, it actually creates the waves of the sea. So to me, that's super fascinating, because when we're thinking about Yeshua in the boat, and the boat's essentially going down, and his disciples like, "Yeah, you're gonna get up. We're all gonna drown." And he gets up and he rebukes the wind. I see that now as like essentially he's basically just saying, "Hey, angel in charge of this window, closer or whatever," right? Like, stop the wind from doing its thing. It's now all of a sudden I'm reading this stuff. I'm like, wow, there's so many interesting elements within this section that describe even just simple things like where wind comes from. It's just fascinating to me.
Yeah, it's here in Enoch 76. Actually, I was a chapter away, but it talks about the 12 portals open to all quarters of the heaven. That word heaven also means firmament, for those of you watching, guys. That is the actual name given to the structure of the firmament that encapsulates and encloses us, and the winds go forth and blow over the earth from it. And there's 12. The word portal just means doorways or gates, right? So I think that's interesting, because in the Hebrew, the word dalet is the 4th letter in their alphabet, and it also means door or gateway. So I think that's interesting. But yeah, this is how they'll blow over the, 3 of them are open, and then on the face of it, so they open on the actual firmament, and then that's when it'll let in different types of winds. And so it's very fascinating how this works. And in fact, this is where I don't know if our brother West Blaze is in the chat tonight, but he and I last year we did season 1 of Uncommon Ground, our biblical cosmology show, and in episode 4 we reviewed Antarctica, and I tried to show this Russian documentary that I found about the Russian Antarctic military base and how they were interviewing people, and they were talking about how all weather that the main continents of the earth and all the governments of the earth, they'll have their weather prediction models. They get that data from the weather instrumentation that they set up in Antarctica,
close to the portals. Yeah, interesting.
If we're taking this model for what it says, then that means that Antarctica is the outer ice rim, if you will, right next to the firmament, and that's where they would have the first indicator of which winds are coming, east, north, south, west. You know what I'm saying? So it makes perfect sense, with this model that our Father revealed to Enoch and Moses.
Yeah, it's amazing. And I'm sorry, I didn't mean to turn this into an Honor of Kings, episode here in Enoch, but it's all part of this, right?
It's part of it. No, it's part of it. Yeah.
Yeah, right on.
So yeah, absolutely, brothers. And that's something else that you mentioned in your video, probably about 3/4 of the way, and you started talking about how there's a lot of Babylonian influence in, this idea of ancient Israel being forced to move away from what they were keeping with the solar calendar into more of a lunar-based calendar. Now, I just try to remind people that the Babylonian Empire was ruled by different leaders over time, and for about 300-ish, well, less than 300 actually, because the Romans took over, right?
Mm-hmm.
But during the days of the 3rd and 2nd century BC, you had the Greeks with Alexander the Great came and took over the Empire of Babylon, which also still ruled over the land of Judea, which encompassed both the returning exiles from the days of Ezra from Babylon in the southern kingdom, as well as Samaria, which was the former northern kingdom in the land of Judea. So by the time you get Alexander the Great coming through, and then he takes over Babylon and literally makes Babylon the capital across the Euphrates of his empire, then the Seleucids took over after him in that region. And they were forcing, this is where you step into the story of the Maccabees in approximately 176 BC. So this is where they were forcing people to move away that priesthood. They didn't want the priesthood of Jerusalem that was being very prosperous, because they were actually following the law of God properly at that time. Like, they were powerful, right? This is what the story of Maccabees explains. So the Greeks come in and try to force people away and get them on a lunar calendar. And that debate was still being had up into the days of Yeshua of Nazareth in the 1st century AD. Mm-hmm. And you kind of touch on that a little bit in your video, don't you?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting because it can be hard to follow the history properly, Sean, because as you know, there's such a mix mash of cultures taking over, right? And on top of it, we have what's the greater Israel is splitting, and they're essentially split up, and you have the southern kingdom, the northern kingdom. And so from what I can tell, how do I say this? There was a bit of a struggle, like a power struggle that happened between the traditionalists, those who kept the Zadok priestly calendar, and those who were essentially being Hellenized by their Greek influence from being conquered for so long. And the Hellenizers were essentially the Hasmoneans. So they wanted to integrate into culture. They wanted to, acquiesce to the demands of the cultures that have taken them over, and start viewing and practicing their religion and their traditions and definitely their calendar according to how the Greeks did it. And
I think in modern times they call that multicultural diversity training.
Yeah,
that's right.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and so you had these people who were Hellenizers, essentially, which it's a fancy word for basically just means Greek influencing people to become Greeks, and in lack of a better word,
which meant you worship their gods.
Exactly. And so the more traditionalist ones, the Zadokites, the ones who came from the lineage of Zadok, they didn't want any part of this, because they knew that inherently integrated into the covenant was not only the priesthood but the calendar. Like, they're married concepts, and so they fought against this. And so the Seleucid king who came in during this time, which is around this, I think it's around the 2nd century BC, Sean, like latter end of the 2nd century BC, when Antiochus came in. He essentially sided with the Hellenized Jews who were willing to integrate into what he wanted done in his kingdom, and he actually ended up not allowing the traditionalists to participate in their way of keeping the commandments and their calendar. He wanted that all done away with, because he saw that there was already a heavily influenced people who were Jews who were fine with doing this. So that's where the real conflict took place.
I refer to those as the origins of the Pharisees, or in the language of the 1998 movie Blade, we would call those the familiars. They were basically willing to do whatever the vampires asked, right? Because they were spineless. So this is why when you get 150 years later to the days of Yeshua, you start to see the Pharisees are just doing whatever Rome asks of them, right? They just want to stay as the little proxy underneath the Roman rule, in charge over the people and backed by the Roman power. So this is why the Pharisees were power hungry, looking to be praised by the people and by the Romans, which is why they were. Yeah, sorry, not to get on a tangent with too much, but you're exactly right. So
it's important. It's important to know this stuff, because where did this divide in the calendar happen? Right, we have the origination of this conflict taking place in historical writings. Unfortunately, these manuscripts aren't in our Western Protestant canon of 66. They are, however, in other traditions and other canons, and so that being First and Second Maccabees, they're important historical documents that show this tension between two groups of people. One group who was by rights practicing the priesthood according to the Levitical order, right, through Zadok and his progeny. They were the ones that were given and promised the priesthood, and then you had another group of people who ended up wanting to usurp that and take that over, completely change the way that you operate on Yahweh's creation solar calendar, and just follow the Greeks. And so I think it's in Ecclesiasticus chapter 50, also known as Sirach, where the writer of this book he's praising a lot of the patriarchs, and actually one of these notable men that he mentions is Simon the Second. I can't remember what he's called. I think it's just Simon. It's the high priest Simon in Ecclesiasticus chapter 50, where he's mentioning him with high regard, that he was a good man. And so this particular priest is also mentioned in the writings of the Maccabees. And so Simon had an elder son named Onias the third. And then he had a usurping son whose name was Jason. And this name Jason wasn't his initial name. He actually, through the Hellenization process, decided to put on a Greek name. I guess that's a Greek name, Jason. And so that's what led to the Maccabean revolt, is this tension between the last successor of Zadok, is this Simon II, and his sons. One son wanted to continue on with the rightful ownership of the priesthood. The other son was Hellenizing and fine with it. So that's
in fact,
an interesting...
didn't they kick out Onias II and pushed him into Egypt? And then he went over to Ptolemy in Egypt and had Ptolemy commissioned to build his own temple in the area of Goshen. Which is crazy. That's actually going to be in my Identity Crisis Part 2 that people keep asking me for 2 years now. That I'm not, but I was trying to get a specific interview with this one rabbi who talked about an ancient library that was found in Elephantine Island. But yeah, that's part of that history that is just glazed over, that most Christians don't know, is that there was a coup. Right? It was like, because the Levites were the political leaders of the day. So if you're trying to take over that rulership, and you're going to do it with outside foreign interests, I mean, that's kind of like the story of the American Civil War. The moment that the North and the South went to fighting each other, they both started receiving money from outside interests. One went to the French and one went to the British. You know what I mean? It's like, and those outside interests also felt like they had something to gain by saying, okay, if I can get these Hasmoneans, or if I can get these Hellenized group of people to abscond this priesthood, then we'll have power over this entire people group, right? Yeah. And that's just from a political level, but think about it from a spiritual level, right? Because I do not believe that these strategizers, especially if you read the Book of Jubilees, when you see that they, the Seleucids and I can't remember his name, was it Nazar or whatever the commanding general it was for, underneath that Greek ruler at that time, he specifically wanted to attack the Israelites on a Sabbath because he knew their religious practices and beliefs, and not
to do war on Sabbath, right? Not to participate in war on Sabbath. Yeah.
So it wasn't just simply a financial or land grab or political scheming for the sake of being in love with politics. This is a spiritual battle being played out through the hands of kings and armies. Yeah. And this is where those rulers and those foreign nations, specifically the Greeks, they worshipped the gods of the Greeks, the gods of Babylon, and those gods influences their leaders to do specific things against the people of Israel alone, right? Because they were trying to literally obliterate the people of the covenant. And during the days of, the Maccabees, like I said earlier, like they were actually doing the covenant right, and they were blessed. This is why they had the temple was full of wealth, right? Because they were actually paying their tithes properly and doing the feast days properly, which is where you come to pay your first fruits and tithes. And you know what I'm saying? Which means, Ken, they were following the right calendar to do those properly. Exactly. And the Father was just throwing blessings on them as a result of it, which is promised in Leviticus 26 and Deuteronomy 4. So this is Yeah, thank you, Jason T. It's Necaner. I don't know where I came up with my name, but Necaner.
Yeah,
he
yeah.
was
You're
he was
close.
the guy that was exceedingly evil. But yeah, this is why it's all correlated. Like you might think we're just going to be looking at little square spaces on a calendar this whole hour, but like all this conversation is correlated and comes together, because when we see times of blessing with Israel as a in the land and trying to be a nation with its own sovereignty, as we saw the days of Maccabees, they did that because they were faithfully following the instructions God had given them through their forefathers and prophets, and they were receiving the full blessing of it, and it was only when their leadership failed them and betrayed them and started sympathizing with outside occultic forces did they suddenly become weakened to the point of the Romans completely scattering them in AD 70. But also in the days of Yeshua, we see they're so weakened they can't even recognize the Messiah.
Yeah.
And therefore they slander him and kill him. And that's obviously was prophesied in the Testament of Levi, which claims he got the information from the book of Enoch.
Isn't that something? It all connects. It's amazing. Yeah, and brother, what you were talking about, you've mentioned on other broadcasts that you've done over the last couple of years, namely talking about a highly regarded scholar named Rachel Ellier. She is one of the better specialized women as it pertains to Dead Sea Scrolls and ancient Israel calendrical studies. And so, just listening to some of her lectures and expositions and reading a little bit of her material has led me to believe, this is her on screen here. So she's an Israeli professor of Jewish philosophy at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. And she doesn't have, from what I can tell, Sean, she doesn't have a dog in the hunt.
Right.
She,
in fact, she would lose her job if she pressed too hard.
Exactly. She seems to just be dedicated to the truth, right? What is and I'm not saying, she believes things that I don't necessarily agree with, so I don't want people thinking that I'm, highlighting her and putting her in a position of authority.
She was raised in Judaism, so she has a lot of,
She likes Kabbalah a little bit too and stuff. Yeah. So I definitely don't recommend that. But what she has to say with regards to the Book of Jubilee, sorry?
I was just going to say her research has caused her to question some things, and she openly admits that in some of her presentations. But she doesn't take it to the conclusions that we do, because she would lose her job.
Yes, so, exactly. We don't, our YouTube ministry can get unplugged, I guess, but she has a little more going for her. But so she knows and recognizes the validity, authenticity, legitimacy, and cultural relevance of the Book of Jubilees and First Enoch, and she believes that these were scriptures and that the ancients revered them as such. And so she gleaned these books and got a lot of her information from these books, and has essentially stated and asserted that yes, ancient Israel was on a solar 364-day calendar. They were not on a lunisolar or a lunar based calendar. And then she'll go through the history of where that got changed. And so I highly recommend people listen to her if you want to know where the dividing line is between when ancient Israel was on their calendar correctly and then it transitioned into something that wasn't appointed by the Father. I think she's a leading voice with that regard. And even alternatively to her, Sean, if you want to skip ahead just a few minutes to the next individual that I used in my presentation, his name's Sasha. Yeah, that's the guy right there. Sasha Stern is his name. Now he's heavily steeped in Judaism, but he's honest with regards to the calendar switch. He fully admits that, we have a lot of Babylonian influence in this calendar that we follow. Ancient Israel, he says they likely always followed a lunar calendar, but he shores that up with a lot of speculation, and it's admitted speculation.
Yeah.
Because he doesn't have Jubilees and Enoch in his repertoire. He doesn't believe that they're legitimate. So he makes that assumption, but he knows that a lot of its calendar comes from paganism and comes from other cultures where they were influenced in their Babylonian exile. So to me, it's like, all right, so you're listening to this guy. He's just as esteemed as Rachel Ellier, but on the other end in Israel. And he's a professor of rabbinic Judaism, and he specializes in ancient and medieval Jewish history with an interest in time, calendars, and chronology. So he likes this topic as well. I hope he considers, testing his own traditions and the roots of Judaism, and digs a little deeper than he has. But so yeah, I wanted to use both opposing views, but I just found it interesting, Sean, that he was transparent with regards to just how pagan it really is, you know.
Yep.
And I don't believe the Father ever has wanted that. I mean, for people who are part of these messianic congregations, right? So if you're a Torah, Hebrew roots Torah movement, whatever, person who wants to start following the feast days and get on a calendar, you've probably already encountered that there are a few different ways to keep the feast days according to some different traditional calendars. And so I highly recommend, if this is on your heart to do so, look into the roots of where these calendars come from, and then use discernment, pray about it, research, obviously study, and make your conclusions on whether or not you want to be adhering to something that clearly has pagan origins to it, and where scholars say that ancient Israel followed a completely different calendar. They'll admit it. So do what you want with that information, but my heart and my convictions has led me to having those awkward conversations with people saying, I'm sorry, like, you know, I say at the beginning of this video that I put out, I don't want this to be a create more division. And it doesn't need to be. We can still all, like I said, if it's on your heart to go to 5 different Passovers, it's all memorializing it anyways, right, Sean? We're not keeping it to the letter exactly to how the Father has always intended us to do it. So we're practicing. We're trying our best, and the Father's going to honor that. But I think we can get close.
Yeah. And just for a lot of people that may be asking or may have asked, because we've gone through quite a few topics, you know, in an hour and 14 minutes. So just for consideration, let me put this up here for us real quick. Actually, yeah. So can you see that?
Yep.
Okay. So this is the Gregorian calendar that most of the Western world uses right now. Okay, in the United States. Supposedly it's 365 days, 0.2425, and it goes on. So what a lot of people say is 0.24, right? 365 days and a quarter. Mm-hmm. And they'll say that this is, you know, well, they'll ask you because they don't, you know, understand how they forget, I should say, how leap day works.
Yeah.
And so like they'll say, well, how could 364 be proper? Where's the extra time come from? What happens with the extra days? And I'm like, guys, it's just Common Core calendar. The Gregorian calendar, as you saw, I just had on the screen, introduced in the 1500s. It's just like Common Core math. It gets to the same outcome, but they just take the long way to do it. So instead of doing 364 every year, it goes, all right, we'll do 365 and a quarter, and then every 4 years,
we'll have a leap year, yeah.
We'll change the calendar a little bit. And when? Oh, in a month that they've already figured in less days in that month. You ever wonder why February has 28 days as opposed to 30 or 31?
Yeah.
Because they're prepping. They're fixing the holes in the math to get to that 4th year cycle where then they add an extra day and suddenly it's all right again. Yeah. The reason the Gregorian calendar seems like nonsense when you get to February and the leap year is because they're just making up to get back to that full cycle of the 364 every year, right? So literally, they've just taken some off here to add it there, and then after every 4 years, it comes back to a congruence because they magically add another day. Like that's why it's so confusing, because they've literally taken what's perfect and what works in a perfect 364 every 91 days, 4 times a year, perfectly works together, and then they've just jumbled it up. Like I said, it's like Common Core, and I don't know if you're familiar with that term in the United States.
I'm familiar with it.
Okay, yeah. So it's like my son was in 4th grade several years ago, and I remember looking at some of his math, and they were doing some of the Common Core stuff, and I was like, oh, I got to get him to homeschooling soon. So he is in homeschooling now, but nice. But I just remember going like, dude, that's 9 times 36. 9 times 4 is 36. Like that's just multiplication tables. You didn't have to do all these other steps to get there. Like that's ridiculous.
Yeah.
So
the long way around.
Yeah, and that's all they've done. Like literally, I guess in a funny, humorous way, that literally is just a great metaphor for the enemy. All of the enemy's deception is to get you away from the simplicity of just following the Father's instructions for right living, which is what he calls his commandments, right? The commandments of the covenant. And the simplicity of doing the behavior of Jesus, to see that it's literally doesn't have to be complicated. But here comes the enemy saying, well, sure, it's complicated because, he told Adam to do one thing, and then he told Noah to do a different thing, and then he told Moses and all those people for a few hundred years to do something different. And now we are here under Christ, and we do something different than all of them. And that's just nonsense, right? That's common core theology is what I should probably call it from now on. So the simplicity of Christ is literally just, hey, he's doing his Father's behavior, and so should we.
For my yoke is easy and my burden is light.
That's right.
Yeah.
My burden is without common core.
Yeah, exactly. So, brother, what you're saying, essentially, if I can go full circle with bringing in Judaism's calendar, right? You were mentioning, as you said, they're all calendar systems that are apart from the creation solar calendar are pulling days here and there, intercalating months, years, So in Jubilees chapter 6, it says specifically that those who follow the moon are going to bring in their year 10 days too early.
That's right.
And we know that there's a 354, sometimes some people say 355 day. The book of Jubilees says 354 days is what that year will represent. And that's an incomplete year. And so we know through Judaism and their practices that they add a 13th month every 3 years, because every year they're losing 10 days. And simple math here, right? 10 days times 3 years, that's 30 days. And what do we know is in 1 month, according to this solar calendar? It's 30 days. It's just a specific 30 days. That's it. So they're losing a month every 3 years. So they have to add another month. And it doesn't say anywhere in scripture to do that. There's no commandment to do that in Enoch and Jubilees and any of the Protestant 66 books. Nowhere. It's a tradition of man that isn't supported.
Yeah. And that's why in Enoch, it tells you the same thing Jubilees tells you, is that you can count it for 8 years, basically. And you'll see that after 8 years, you have 80 extra days, or 80 days short that the moon falls behind the sun.
Yeah.
So it's literally just 10 days a year that the moon is moving through the sky in its circumference slower than the path of the sun and the stars. The sun and the stars keep in tandem with each other, but just, that's after that's 80 days after 8 years, right? So that's a big difference. That's why if you try to follow the moon, you're going to get these Sabbaths wrong, and that's where it's these two witnesses, both Enoch and Jubilees, say the exact same thing with the exact same math. It's in Enoch 74. It's in Jubilees chapter 6. It's simple. It's a 364 day year. And that's all it has to. That's all it is. It's all the Father made. It's pretty simple. So
it's simple. It's beautiful. And I hope that people, look into it more, especially those who are interested in keeping the Father's feast days, who are on like Hallel 2 or, whatever Judaism follows with their calendar. I think Sean and I have spoken at length over the last couple of years about Judaism and its roots, and where they definitely don't want, like Sean, for instance, Rabbi Akiva, one of the prominent rabbis in Jewish history, says that anyone who essentially reads the book of Enoch isn't going to be awarded eternal life in the life to come.
Right.
So that's a threat, right, that he made in the latter part of the first century. And unfortunately, that is what we see Judaism doing. It's threatening people. You don't look at those books. Don't read those books. Why?
Well, it's not just Judaism. Unfortunately, it's spread into Protestant Christianity.
Sure. Yeah. Which, it stems from Judaism, though, right?
Yeah. Well, that's where it originally came from. You're right. Yeah. From the first century in Judaism, they put the fear into it, and that same fear was picked up with the Catholic Church. They discarded the Book of Enoch, while all the early church fathers in the same time period of the Catholic formation, they believed in the Book of Enoch and quoted it and wrote about it and wondered why it was being dismissed. I have a quote from Origen on that in 3rd century AD. Mm-hmm. And then, here comes the Protestant Reformation, which was really just Catholicism light. You know what I mean? Exactly. And they come along and they have the same tenor and the same opinion towards this particular book of First Enoch. And all along the way, how coincidentally you have them, confused about theology everywhere, right?
Yeah.
and come up with these different, and then trying to scare people to say, oh, it's book full of this. I mean, there's literally people in the chat that were having this video tonight. There's people in the live chat saying, I'm afraid to read the book of Enoch because I don't want to be deceived. And you're like, do you know how much it talks about the Messiah in the book of Enoch? Do you know how much it correlates? And if you don't, you're welcome to go check my main channel, Kingdom in Context. I did an entire debate where I talk about all the ways that it's validated as scripture and the 127 different cross-referenced synchronized verses with the canon of 66. Ken and I, on my main channel, Honor of Kings, we've done 2 seasons where we did, I think, 13 entire episodes in the book of Enoch. And just type in YouTube, Kingdom in Context, Honor of Kings, Book of Enoch. We've done like 13 whole episodes. And in fact, in season 2, I did a whole historical manuscript breakdown of the Book of Enoch to show its validity. So like there's a ton of information out there, guys. It's not scary. It's not going to just grab you and deceive you somehow. You can just test it for yourselves. Just you have to read it first,
Yeah, and unfortunately, Sean, in the same spirit as like a Rabbi Akiva, depending on what denomination you come from, people will teach that if you look at these books, you're going to be led astray, right? They instill this fear of looking outside of the authorized, Bible that they have in their church. And so people are just bred into that understanding of, oh my gosh, this is it. This is literally the word of God, these 66 books. And that is it because pastor says so and tradition says so. And I can't look. People, please get over that fear. Test it. You will not spontaneously combust. I promise you that. You won't be doing that, at least when you're looking at these books. For other things, I don't know. I can't make that claim. But,
you remember a few weeks ago, I had those 2 pastors on to talk about the rapture or the resurrection.
Yeah.
And there was the point in that conversation where this came up, this idea of, the American canon of 66. And is it, and I said, well, you guys, the 15, what was it, 1511 or 1527 KJV, it originally had the extra 14 books in there that were later removed. And they had already said that they were just KJV only, and they were 1527 KJV only pastors. And I was like, okay, well, the original one had the extra 14 books. And they're like, well, that's not scripture, because they were like KJV only, pure and unrefined, unadulterated, inerrant word of God. And I'm sitting there going, literally the history of the book that you think is perfect has more books in it. Right. And so, but that wasn't addressed. But that is unfortunately a fear tactic. It's what I call, just like with the Trinitarian topic, it becomes theological intimidation. And this is what that rabbi did in the first century. And I theorize, now Rachel Elior doesn't say this, but I theorize the reason that the rabbis, the Pharisees, the same Pharisees that killed Yeshua and John the Baptist, the reason that those Pharisees would tell people, don't read Enoch, Jubilees, and Testament of Patriarchs is because it abundantly has prophecies about the Messiah who becomes your high priest, which is exactly what was bringing people to Christ, because these people understood the role of the Messiah was to become your high priest, to make sit atonement for you and resurrect you. And this is what Enoch, Jubilees, and Testament of Patriarchs expound emphatically about. And of course, they didn't want people to understand that process and how that works so that they would stop believing in the Messiah, which was Yeshua of Nazareth. Like, it was how they were trying. They lied about the guy when he was alive. They killed him to death. They lied about him when he's resurrected. And they tried to remove the text of the prophets that explained who he was after he ascended to heaven. Like, these are broods of vipers, right? I'm not going to take my theological cues from these dudes.
They literally paid people to go around spreading false information regarding Yeshua's resurrection, which Roman guards witnessed.
Yeah.
They witnessed angelic interaction, shaking, like, they were told to go and say, no, don't say that story. Say something different. We'll say this. Like, they are that deceived in their minds. And it's, why would you want to get any information from anyone associated with that brood of vipers, as you say, Sean? It's, that's questionable to me.
Yeah, it is. Someone in the chat's asking about the most accurate translation of Enoch. Do you have any thoughts on that?
Well, unfortunately, we don't have very many translations. I think the R.H. Charles does a pretty good version. What else is there, Sean? What other translations are there aside from R.H. Charles? I mean, I'm sure there's you got that's Sefer. If you like the usage of, sorry,
I'm just going to shut my mouth. I would suggest, unfortunately, I would say Paleo Hebrew was what it was written in. But we don't have, there's only like a small little fragment of Paleo Hebrew that was found in the Dead Sea Scrolls, specifically of the Book of Enoch. Most of it was found in Latin, Greek, or Aramaic. Also, in the Giaz language, they've had it for a long, long time. To my understanding, and maybe Hannibal in the crowd, since he is Ethiopian, maybe he has some extra information on this and he can validate. But to my understanding, they've had it for at least 2,000 years in a Giaz translation in Ethiopia. So that means they possibly had access to either the early Greek or the early Paleo Hebrew translations to get that Giaz translation. But unfortunately, I don't think there is a perfect translation because there's still just what's left to us in antiquity is just fragmented scrolls anyway.
Yeah,
so,
it's not the complete book. First Enoch that we have access to isn't even the complete rendition of his writings. We know that there was an intact, apparently full book that was auctioned off, and someone has it, right, Sean? Some private buyer ran off with it and has yet to release any of it to the general public, unfortunately. So, yeah.
It's.
But which book? Yeah, R.H. Charles is good. I think it's a very suitable version to read. That's the one that I've been using all these years, and I think it's fine.
The reason why I like R.H. Charles is because he was an actual Greek scholar and translator from Oxford. And so he actually knew, and then, like I said, the majority of the manuscripts passed down through antiquity was in Latin and Greek from the Book of Enoch. So only until in the 20th century did they find little bits of fragments in Paleo Hebrew and then full manuscripts of Aramaic. So R.H. Charles's translation came along in the early 20th century before the Dead Sea Scrolls were found. And so he was just pulling from what had been left over throughout time. Also from the Giaz and the Greek, those are his main sources of translation. So that's why I think his are pretty cool.
Yeah, and there's another guy,
Richard
Henry. Him and Henry Barclay Sweet. He was
that's right.
a Bible scholar in England, I believe, in the early part of the 1900s, who actually, surprisingly enough, taught that the first book of Enoch was part of the Septuagint.
Yeah, he put it in his Bible, right?
He did, yeah. So
the Barclay Sweet Septuagint?
Yeah.
Is that what the title of it is?
I'm not sure what the title of that is called, but I know the Lexham English Septuagint is loosely based off of the Sweet's teachings and stuff. Yeah.
It just with this question comes up a lot, but guys, just people are responding to my.
I'm not seeing the question. Where's the question at?
It's not really a question. It's just people, I'm just monitoring the chat. Just people are responding to my reaction to the Sefer. Guys, it's not that I don't like the Sefer. I own one. Actually, Ken gifted me with it. I like the fact that it has all the books in it. I just don't like the Trinitarian bias that's in it.
Yeah, there's a strong Trinitarian bias in it for sure.
Yeah, I would read it with eyes wide open because it's got. I don't like that. And I don't think it. Okay, here's another thing I just want to say, and this is not really anything about scholarship as far as a translation. This is just simply how we relate our truth of the Messiah and the beauty of his love and commandments to the outside world. Our evangelistic efforts. People that have, in my experience, people that have steeped themselves in the Sefer translation can no longer communicate easily.
It's true. The Hebrew
with
in the way,
the outside world because everything is. Got to show you. Like you don't. I can't. It's like half translated. Like it's like you're in a different country and they're speaking like half French and half English with broken English, right?
Mm-hmm.
I'm not saying that the phonetically translated words in the Sefer is a bad thing. I'm just saying people get so used to reading that they forget that the person at the grocery store checking out their groceries, they don't know who Yahuwah is.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like they're not getting down with Yahushua Mashiach. They don't understand that words coming out of your mouth, Chris Tucker from Rush Hour. They don't understand what you're saying, and how are they going to have an impact if it's like, wait, he's trying to teach me the truth about God's behavior and his son who wants to give me a salvation. This is how I walk in his truth and my life can get better and I can live in wisdom. And like, they don't speak broken English. You see what I mean? So like, that's the issue I have. Because people have adopted that book with such fervor that they start speaking like the book, right?
Yeah,
and that's where I just
I've
that's why I don't promote it.
Yeah, my personal preference is not that book. I have migrated away from that version. I have the first edition, and I was stoked when it first came out. And like Sean said, we're not denigrating the work that the translator of that book has done, and all the years it's taken for him to do it, and it was on his heart to do. That's great. It's just not my personal favorite book for a few reasons. We don't have to keep going into it, but yeah, it does have a lot of the extra biblical books, which is cool. There's not many versions out there that have it all, so that's what it has going for it. And if you want to read them all and all the variances of the Hebrew that's thrown in there, fine. I got frustrated with it after probably about 2 years. I was like, I can't. What word is this again? And what? Whatever. Just give me the English.
Yeah. There's also, I think he does a good job with the addendums, where he's added even more apocryphal books in there than the original version. So yeah, I mean, to each his own. Those are the reasons I don't talk about it on my channel. So yeah, or use it to read from. So yeah, because I just want to reach as many people as possible. So that's why I interchange between Jesus and Yeshua. That's why I don't demonize people over whether they're speaking Hebrew or not. Yeah, but ultimately, brother, I think that you've done a great job with the calendar. Would you like me to put on screen a little bit about your actual calendar breakdown as far as the days and everything? Did you want to show that and present that?
Yeah, sure. You can do that.
Let me see if I can find it in your video real quick. Not finding it. There it is. Okay.
Should be about halfway in there.
There we go.
Yeah. Okay.
And this, of course, was the moment where you're trying to explain the 7th month. After trumpets, atonement, and tabernacles, there's the Feast of Addition. But also at the beginning of the first month, you have that intercalary day, which would be a new moon day.
That's right. I call it a day of remembrance because I wanted to kind of pick up on the uniqueness of the origins of this day. So it calls it a day of remembrance in the book of Jubilees, right? And for those of you who don't know, it's specifically these 4 feast days happen on the first day of the first month, which is the head of the year. It happens on the 4th month, first day of the 4th month, first day of this 7th month, as you see on screen, and then it'll be on the first day of the 10th month. And coincidentally, it all has to do with the seasonal transitions into the new seasons. And it's talked about in the book of Jubilees how each of these specific feast days correlate to specific events of the flood. So the first day of the first month relates to Noah starting to build the ark. And then and onward, and it represents points within the time of the flood, which is really cool because it's a renewal of the covenant, right?
Yeah,
I mean, it's the Father's always pointing us back to keeping in covenant with Him, and when we participate in these days, that's what we do. So what you're looking here on the screen, it's simple. There's no names of the month. It's just literally month 1, month 2, all the way to month 12. So we're here on month number 7. There's no names for it, no Ishtar or Tammuz day month. It's literally just month number 7. And then we have similarly with the days of the week, day 1, day 2, day 3, all the way to day 7. I've put in the Gregorian information as well, just so it's easy for people to transition from the Gregorian calendar to this calendar. Eventually, like I said earlier in the broadcast, I would love to just get rid of sun, mun, tus, wend, to get rid of those and just day 1, day 2, day 3. Sure. But it's going to take a long time, I think, for people to get into that. And we want to have a lot of people doing it eventually, right, Sean? Just like keeping the commandments, just like understanding the gospel message of the King of God. It takes lots of time. So I might have versions of this where it's like this for newbies coming in and wanting to slowly transition, and then make a separate one for people who are a little, more experienced with it. We'll see about that. But so we have the feast days at their appropriately designated times according to the Father, as described in His instructions for when we're to celebrate them. Here we have trumpets on day number 1, along with a day of remembrance.
Awesome. Yep.
Yeah. So it's a 2-fold feast day. It's amazing. We see that also with other feast days, right? We have the Feast of First Fruits and Feast of Weeks, and that's earlier on
feast day.
Yeah. So it's not uncommon to see that happening.
And then you got atonement is here as well as tabernacles. But, as tabernacles, you have 2 Sabbaths, right?
Yep.
With tabernacles, you have one on the 15th and the 21st.
Yeah, and then we have obviously the weekly one because this festivity goes throughout the week and it goes into the 7th-day Sabbath as well. So you'll participate a Sabbath on that as well. But the addition one comes from the Book of Jubilees as well. We get to see where the origination of that additional day or the 8th day comes in, and that's really fascinating. So I called it addition because that's what it was called in the Book of Jubilees. I like I said, I try to harken back to the earliest mentions of what it is that we're celebrating instead of the latter days. So
I like the Feast of Addition because to me, if a lot of people have, they go through great lengths to try to correlate the feast days to Jesus of Nazareth, right? I personally think they're all correlated to the day of the Lord when Jesus returns on the second coming.
Yeah, I agree.
And so that's how I kind of view their symbolism as far as why it's such a big deal. So to me, the Feast of Addition, even though the Book of Jubilees, again, the only book that tells us where this day comes from and why it's being kept, how beautiful. Okay, so this is just my theories and thoughts. All right, guys, just keep this is not in the scriptures. This is just my understanding of that all the feasts and their symbolism relates to the day of the Lord. I know there's probably people in the chat right now typing, no, the first 3 relate to his first coming, the second 3 relate to his last. No, guys, I understand. I've heard that before too. I hear you. It's my theory. It's my understanding that all the feasts relate to the second coming of what's called the great day of the Lord. And they all teach you something about that. This particular Feast of Addition, I think that this 7th month is when the Matthew 25 sheep and goats judgment is happening. When all nations, that Yeshua has already descended, the New Jerusalem's already descended, the Battle of Armageddon's already happened 3 months earlier, or actually it would be 6 months earlier. So I believe he's returning around the time of Passover and unleavened bread, and that's why that whole feast is called the Feast of Passover. I believe that's why that's happening, and then you give about 6 months for all the nations of the world to travel to the New Jerusalem because they have to, not just for provisions because they're starving, they need food and water, but they're also going to have to stand judgment before Yeshua. And that's why I think there's this crazy big day of the Day of Atonement. And I think that the sheep are judged as sheep and they get to live. The goats are then killed by the angels, but the sheep are the ones that are being added to the family of God and the kingdom. And that's why it's considered the addition. That's my understanding. I also think that this is it's a double meaning that'll also play out at the end of the millennial reign as well. When you have everyone that had lived and died and observed resurrection throughout the millennial reign will also be added to eternal life into the kingdom of God as their inheritance forever at the end of the millennial reign as well. So I just think that this is how I understand it as far as why there's so many Sabbaths there's actually 8 Sabbaths in the 7th month, which I think is interesting. And the last, and there's, I don't know what that means other than just 8 is it's an interesting number. But I don't want to get into gematria, but the point is, that's the way I understand why this is such a big deal. Like in Exodus 23, it's just called the Feast of Ingathering. And you're not given a lot of a description. Leviticus 23 says you're to celebrate on the 8th day, same as Numbers 29, but it's not explained why. Yeah. It tells you it's a 7-day feast of tabernacles, but also on the 8th day make a Sabbath, an extra Sabbath. It doesn't tell you why in the Masoretic Exodus through Deuteronomy. It only tells you why in Jubilees. Yeah. So these are the same feast days and the same schedule that I foresee and I understand that Enoch would have been keeping in his life before the flood.
I fully concur, brother. And it's amazing because I agree with what you're saying with regards to the day of the Lord. Why wouldn't the Father work on his own calendar? Right?
Right.
Like it seems highly logical and likely that that's what he is going to do. And what I like about this solar calendar, Sean, as we wrap things up here, it puts Yeshua and the Last Supper and that whole event in the New Testament into its proper context. And what I mean by that is it works well with him on this solar calendar, whereas he was for sure having a Passover dinner on the night that he was betrayed, whereas a lot of people, because of what you were just talking about, want to put him as the literal Passover lamb the next day, right? So that, oh, he died as the Passover lamb. Therefore, he wasn't really celebrating Passover the night before. It was something else, a graduation meal or instituting something new. They want to, they like that idea of making him the Passover lamb on that day so that he fulfilled Passover, right? It doesn't work. It just doesn't work. He was prophesied to die a specific way, and this is when they took advantage of the time to do it. But he had Passover the night before he was betrayed, or he died, and so it works on this calendar. Therefore, he wasn't literally crucified, dead, and in the grave on the Passover as that, symbolic Passover lamb that we like to attribute it to him, and he is symbolically that.
It's symbolically, of course. As 1 Corinthians 5:7, but he's also a guilt offering, which is different than a Passover lamb, according to Isaiah 53:10. Yeah. So like it's all these terms are metaphorically applied to him, his sacrifice. But yeah, it's so beautiful that here's the thing that I would always, I think that what's so fascinating about the second coming of the Messiah is that we're doing our best here to figure this out. Right. But when he comes, he's going to literally say, all right, big announcement, guys. Here's day 1 of the year. Right. Yeah. Here's the new calendar we're going to follow. And
the luminaries will be renewed. Right. So
that's right. Jubilees 19. That's right.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. That's only in Jubilees 19. Yeah. Oh, yeah. I wonder why you would need to renew the luminaries at the second coming. Right. Because the whole world will be able to see the luminaries and be able to see, oh, this is how we know when to go to the New Jerusalem, which is required. Zechariah 14. So the whole world, not only will there's going to be several. What do they call it? They call it they call it a red pill when you get awoken to truth. It's like a Matrix reference. And now that little saying has been shifting into all kinds of like black pilled and white pilled, and I've heard all kinds of people using it, right? So I'm going to call it they're going to get manna pilled when Messiah returns, because not only are they going to literally eat manna again, it's like 2 Baruch 27, but they're also going to have this huge mind-blowing experience where they realize he's real. We live in a big room. His ways are not outdated. In fact, it's perfect wisdom, and we're going to all start learning them again. That's how we're going to stop killing each other. And then, we have expectations of us, right? Yeah. And part of those expectations is we literally just have to go spend time with him at his big house. And it's going to be amazing. How burdensome, right? Oh, civility, peace, order, and you get to spend time with a loving God. So burdensome, right?
Yeah. No more rumors of wars, lawlessness. This is what we want. This is what the world really does want. So it's coming. It's amazing, man. Good concluding statement, brother. That was amazing. Yeah, I love it. Good picture.
Beautiful thought. I want to thank everyone in the chat for joining us tonight. A lot of people here. Lots of good things here. Anything you'd like to tell us about coming up, brother?
Yeah, so I'm going to continue. This is a series. This isn't a one and done. Like I want to elaborate more on this calendar and just give people a lot more information about how amazing and cool this thing really is. And so lots of different series I'm working on, Sean. Unfortunately, I like to jump around so that I'm not neglecting certain things, but my ADHD nature just wants me to, I gotta go here. I want to start one here. I want to do this video now. And I will be focusing, I think, a lot more on this particular series because I do want people to recognize the truth that it contains and the blessing that I think it's going to contain too. I've been following this calendar for almost 2 years now, loosely, but I never fully investigated it until late last year. So almost about 4 months ago is when I really, really hunkered down and cracked open this study and went to it. So I just think my heart is to get people looking more towards how amazing this is. And so if people want this particular calendar in a PDF version, it's available over on my Patreon. It's for my patrons only. This is my job now, guys. I was removed from our health authority here in Canada because of a specific medical decision that I made. So this is right now, it's only for patrons. And I also, it gets better. I have magnets displaying the visual that Sean had up on screen earlier, where it literally has this entire calendar on one visual with the circle and the third, like all that stuff. That's going to be a magnet for those who support me at the 2020 tier. So I've already shipped off several of those. There's only 30 available right now. I might order another batch. We'll see. But they're cool. And Sean, I'm going to be sending you one too, because I saw.
Sweet brother.
I noticed that in your last Kingdomcast, you were sporting a "We must hang on his words" shirt. So it's
yeah,
you got one coming, brother.
Awesome, brother. Appreciate it.
It's the least I could do for you, my friend.
Yeah, that's same for you. That's why I give you the study guide. It's the least I can do for you, brother.
Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us this evening. Sean and I are going to be getting back into Honor of Kings. Not this Sunday, possibly next, Sean. I'm going to throw that out there on the airwaves here.
No, we'll have to talk because I might be traveling for.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. We'll just check it. We'll figure out the day.
Yeah, this is another one of those things that people are constantly emailing me, and that's fine. I get it. When are you going to do this book? We like Honor of Kings. When are you going to do that book? And so we've been on a hiatus, largely on my end. So I do want to dedicate some time to doing it, getting back to doing Sunday evening broadcasts, and we have so many more books to do. I want to finish off Enoch too, Sean, eventually.
Yeah.
So
well, I think that maybe the wait has been worth it, right? Because now we've got your calendar to help people as we go through those chapters. Because what did we stop at, like 63?
Yeah, it was like around the 60s. Yeah, with Zach.
So yeah, we're about to step into the calendar stuff and the creation model stuff. And now that I got my study guide done for Enoch as well, it could just help us. We got tons of resources to help us through those episodes now that we didn't have previously. So, and also speaking of the creation model and everything involved in the calendar and watching the luminaries, the sun, moon, and stars, and how interesting is it that the enemy wants to obfuscate that observation with how he does. And this is what the conclusion was of our Investigating Babylon series. Guys, if you haven't seen that series on this channel, I'm replaying it every Friday on my main channel, Kingdom in Context. And for everyone that did love it and you want to have it to share with other people, you can now have it yourself. It's in the video description below. Here's a quick teaser for that series. A lot of you may be thinking, what does that have to do with the calendar? Just watch it. You'll see.
That is, if finding out the truth of the biblical cosmology isn't the biggest red pill, then I think that series might be a close second, possibly first. So definitely got to watch that one. Yeah, and if you don't watch all of it, if you try to skip to the end and just watch the end, it's going to feel like an enema and not a pill. So start from episode Lubricate one. It starting from episode one.
Start from episode one, and that way it'll go down much smoother in the right way. So
nice.
Thank you so much for joining me here, brother. We'll let you go tonight, and I'm going to stay on for another 4 hours and take questions. Psych.
Wow.
Psych.
Dedication. No, I appreciate you having me on, brother. I really do. And I hope everybody was blessed by something that I said, definitely what Sean said. And we love you guys, and continue on your quest for truths. The Father got you where you are for a reason. So be thankful for that, and continue prayerfully considering the matters that we talked about this evening. It is important.
Thank you guys so much for joining us tonight. We'll see you next time.